excited to have Ralph Nader speaking at our opening TMS Presents of this school year. We wanted Mr. Nader to speak at TMS because he has single-handedly made a difference in this world. We're the kind of school that provides learning both inside and outside of the classroom. And today we have invited a man who is a consumer advocate, political activist, author, lecturer, and attorney. Ralph Nader is a leader who has a place in history and is still making history. He's been honored by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential Americans of the 20th century. He attended Princeton University and Harvard Law School. As you know, he ran for president and has since become an expert on the role of the presidency. Ralph Nader is a brave and honest person who has been unafraid to speak his truth about important issues facing our nation. This is something we try to teach our students every day, to confidently speak their truth and to stand up for what is right. How many of you have heard of OSHA? He helped to found it. How many of you have heard of the Environmental Protection Agency? He also founded that and the Consumer Product Safety Commission. We have seatbelts in our cars because of Ralph Nader. We have airbags in our cars because of Ralph Nader. Because of Ralph Nader, we have safer drinking water, cleaner air, and freedom of information. Mr. Nader has long been an advocate for consumer rights, open government, and humane business practices. In his latest book, Breaking Through Power, It's Easier Than We Think, Mr. Nader discusses ways in which wealth manipulates politics, labor, media, the environment, and the quality of national life today. I asked Mr. Nader if he could tell me a little bit about what he was like when he was in high school, and he said that he liked to fly kites. He was very interested in kites. He played baseball, and he also played chess. Some little known facts about him: you may not know that he was in the Guinness Book of Records for having given the most speeches. He gave 21 speeches in a 24-hour period. 3 times he's been on Saturday Night Live. If you Google it, you can see it. It's truly an honor to have Ralph Nader at the Marin School today. Please help me welcome Mr. Ralph Nader.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Barbara Brown. And ladies and gentlemen, and of course the students here at the Marin School. I'm not going to talk to the students in any other different way than I would talk to people twice or 3 times your age. And so I do want to take this opportunity to give you a panorama of what kind of work we do, and hope that you will do the same kind of work in advancing a more just world, where there's more peace and more fair play and more respect for the people and the environment, and people can live up to their life's possibilities and not be repressed or exploited or harmed. I do want to start with a little example, because a lot of people think that people in their teenage years are not ready to engage in serious redirections and changes in our community or neighborhood or country or world. One day, about 25 years ago in Utah, Salt Lake City, a 5th grade girl walked into her class and said that she had discovered a waste dump a few blocks away. And the teacher said, "A waste dump? I mean, we would know that. It's just a few blocks away." And the little girl was persistent. And so she took the class down a few blocks down, and it was a waste dump. It was covered with shrubbery and trees, but it was an old waste dump. So the children got very excited about this discovery, and the teacher said, "Well, why not clean it up?" And so she had a project of the children. And they documented it, they went to town hall, they met the mayor, they had a news conference, and lo and behold, the city sent people to clean up the waste dump. So this made these fifth graders little celebrities. And they testified before the state legislature on the Superfund. And the teacher was so excited herself, she wrote a book called Kids in Social Action. And came out with actually a new edition a few years ago. Her point was that there are a lot of ways to get educated in the wrong way. And one wrong way is just to memorize and regurgitate and vegetate. Another way is to connect with real life, to connect with your community, to connect with each other, put down the cell phones more often, and look at the world and what kind of role you're going to play in it. Now, you probably already know you'd like to have a good job, you'd like to have a family, you'd like to live in a nice place. But if you look at the world, the globe itself, the planet, it's just a few miles around the planet where life can be sustained. And in this infinite universe, our eyes, where you have thousands of galaxies and so on, we have one planet. And there's only so much air and so much water and so much soil. They're not going to be making much more of it. And if we don't preserve it, not just in terms of reducing pollution and greenhouse gases and deal with climate change, but having a peaceful world, because it can be destroyed by nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons. It can be destroyed by serious soil erosion and the cutting of equatorial forests. And if we don't have a role to play, if we basically say, well, someone else is going to take care of the oceans, and someone else is going to take care of the forests, and someone else is going to take care of our government or our big business, and someone else will take care of the tax system, someone else will preserve our family pensions, and someone else will do this, and someone else will do that, then what are you left with? What are you going to do? So we have an opportunity in this country, because of our Constitution and our traditions, of making a difference. And making a difference means making a decision yourself as to what you would look back on in your life when you're 70, 80, 90, 100 maybe. What are you going to look back on and be proud of what you've done for the community or for the nation or for the world, not just for your own family? Now, to put it in a very numerical way, you have about 20,000 days in your active life. Maybe you'll have 24,000 days. And you break that up in weeks. And then you ask yourself, did last week go quickly? Yeah, it went very quickly. And life goes very quickly after you get your license to drive. When you're 15, it's the slowest year you can imagine, at least when I was that age. And you want to have a perspective. Now, one of the shortcomings of being very young is you don't have much of a time perspective. And you don't say, well, what am I going to be doing when I'm 30 or 50 or 70? And, well, I'll wait and see. Well, it's a good idea to have some idea about what you want to do in life, more than one thing, early on, but keep options open in terms of something that changes. A new opportunity, a new tragedy you want to confront, and so on. When I was your age, I grew up in a small town, Winston, Connecticut. It was a hilly town. It had a large lake and 2 rivers, had a lot of woods, and not many people. But it was not a rural area, it was a small town area. And one thing I couldn't stand was a bully. I just couldn't stand a 6th grader beating up a 3rd grader. I had almost a visceral reaction to it, and sometimes I got some scrapes as a result. And when I grew up, I saw there were a lot of bullies around. And one bully got my attention, because I lost a lot of friends in car crashes those days. high school and college, or if they didn't die, they were disabled for life. And it's much better now. Actually, your chances now of being killed and injured in an automobile crash is 1/5 of what it was when I was your age. Because cars are safer. They have seat belts, airbags, padded dash panels, stronger door latches, head restraints, side impact protection. They have better tires, they have better brakes. But in those days, General Motors was selling style and horsepower. The ads were all about style, nice hood ornaments, sleeky shapes of cars, interior decor, different colors, and massive horsepower, like 400 horsepower. They'd brag about it. They'd have ads, for example, say, when you get behind this car, you'll have your own nuclear deterrent, or you'll become a human thunderbolt. That's really a nice advice to drive safely. It was about speed, horsepower, style. In the meantime, the engineering of safety, fuel efficiency, ease of maintenance and repair, stagnant, year after year after year after year. And I used to hitchhike a lot, all over the country. I'd hitchhike to college. I was pretty bored by public transportation. I liked the adventure of hitting the road. And once in a while, the truck drivers picked me up. We'd come to the scene of a crash. It was horrific. Burning flesh, screams, then silent, or constant cries of anguish. Help me, help me. And that made a deep impression on me. And I began to look at the way the cars crushed in a crash. You would see the steering column come right back into the driver's chest, or the occupants would be thrown out on hard pavement, or the seat would slide back and catapult the occupant right through the rear window. Enormous, enormous pressures from just 20, 30, 40, 50 mile an hour crashes. And when I went to law school, I wrote an article for a third-year class on unsafe automobile design and the lack of legal standards. And I turned it into a book, Unsafe at Any Speed. In the meantime, General Motors started finding out what I was doing, and they hired private detectives to follow me, to get dirt on me, to see who I was contacting, and they made a mistake. They followed me to the U.S. Senate when I was about to testify, and that happens to be a federal law that says if you are intimidating a witness before a congressional committee, you're in deep trouble. And the Washington Post and the other papers discovered it. There was a big congressional hearing. The present GM had to come testify, admit that he hired private detectives, and in a few months, the motor vehicle and highway safety laws were passed. In 1966, President Lyndon Johnson signed it into law. I was there at the ceremony at the White House, and then we had to make sure it was reasonably enforced. And indeed, here's the result. In 1965, there were 5.4 deaths per every 100 million vehicle miles traveled in the U.S. And it's now under 1.2, from 5.4 to 1.2. And the Center for Auto Safety estimated 3.5 million averted deaths just in the United States since that time. So what am I trying to communicate? Well, obviously, that one person can make a difference. Doesn't make all the difference. I had people who gave me engineering advice. I had good reporters covering what I was doing in Washington, D.C., New York Times, NBC, ABC. Those are the days when they actually reported news. And, however, again and again in American history, it starts with one person, then 5, then 20. Let me give you some examples. When I was at Princeton, I would walk into my lecture hall, and sometimes I would barely see my fellow students. You know why? They were smoking. Smoking was allowed. I'd go to an exam, and I'd have one student on my right blowing smoke, and another student on my right blowing smoke. Now, if you walked into a class where people were smoking, if you went on an airplane or a bus or a train and you saw people smoking today, I think it would get your attention. You say, what's going on here? Well, the ban on smoking in public places wasn't by accident. When we started pushing the tobacco companies, they were considered king of the roost. I mean, you never challenged tobacco companies. They were too powerful in Congress. They had millions of Americans addicted. 45% of all adults were smoking. It's now under 18%. It's even lower in California, for instance. It wasn't by accident. It was a few doctors, a few citizen advocates, and it started with the U.S. Surgeon General's report in 1964 connecting smoking to cancer and other diseases. And armed with that knowledge, we went to work. And I remember we were proposing no smoking on airlines. Listen, people used to go on airlines and they would be smoking. I once sat with a guy, he lit up a cigar. I said, what are you doing? Only cigarettes are permitted. He said, who are you to tell me what to do? And he blew this huge thing in my face. A cigar. You know what happens in your kitchen when you burn toast? See how fast it fills up? And so we were saying, no smoking on airlines. And they said, you're un-American. You're trying to force us to do something we don't want to do. I said, I'm representing non-smokers, and they outnumber you, and they include children. Don't they have any rights? And now you see the tobacco industry is completely on the defensive. They're going overseas to addict people. They're more regulated, and you have huge areas that are prohibited from smoking, and smokers sit out in the front of the building, you know, taking a drag. You know how many people did that? I asked the expert on that. He was the chief of staff to Senator Warren Magnuson. And I said, Mike, I said, at the peak of the anti-smoking movement in the 1980s, how many people were working full-time against this mighty industry that had all these addicted people on their side? And he said, a few thousand at the most, maybe 2,000 to 3,000. That's all. Up against hundreds of thousands of people promoting, lobbying, selling tobacco products. The lesson here is when you have public opinion on your side and you have knowledge, the power of knowledge, and you have strategy, that is, you have knowledge, but you don't just diffuse it everywhere. You say, well, where is this knowledge best focused to make the decision to ban smoking in public places? Well, it's the legislature and the Congress. So you target it into the legislature and the Congress. And in this book, Breaking Through Power, this is a short book because I want to pay attention to short attention spans today. This has a lot of stories about people, just ordinary people. Lois Gibbs, Niagara Falls, homemaker, raising 3 kids in a housing project, discovered it was on top of a deadly toxic dump. And she and other mothers were wondering why their kids were getting sick. Strange illnesses. And she started contacting the public officials, the governor of New York, getting press. And she built over time the biggest grassroots movement in America against all the toxic leaks and all the toxic afflictions of neighborhoods, chemical companies, and drug companies, and coal companies, and so on. And she started with nothing. She had no power. She had very little knowledge. Here's what she had. She had determination. She was driven, not just to protect her family. She was driven to protect people all over the country, and children all over the country. Lois Gibbs. Ralph Hotchkiss. This is a story that connects with San Francisco State. He was an engineering student at Oberlin when I spoke there in the 1970s, and he was in a wheelchair because he had a bicycle accident in high school and became paraplegic. And he was a very inventive person. And he wanted to come work with us in Washington during the summer. And I said, well, of course. This was the time when people with disabilities were starting to assert their rights. Right to have ramps, right to have equal opportunity for work, even right to play sports. And to make a long story short, he's revolutionized the design and manufacture of wheelchairs, which used to be controlled by one monopoly company in England, Jennings Corporation. And they produced lousy, expensive wheelchairs that broke down. And it's a serious thing when you're in a wheelchair and it breaks down. Not to mention you're ripped off. And he did this with a few colleagues, and he worked out of San Francisco State, and as a paraplegic, he went to third world countries like in Central America, Central Asia, all by himself. Just imagine what it took. Teaching people how to build sturdy wheelchairs inexpensively from local materials. And after a while, these people began teaching him all kinds of technical improvements. These wheelchairs do everything but fly. You can't believe how mobile and flexible and unbreakable they are. And there are 80 million people in the world who desperately need wheelchairs, mostly in developing countries. And in those countries, you don't have a wheelchair, it's like a death sentence. Ralph Hotchkiss, right out of Oberlin. Then there's Sidney Wolfe. There are a lot of medicines no longer in the marketplace because Dr. Sidney Wolfe and his health research group in Washington, D.C. took them off by pressuring the Food and Drug Administration and getting into the press. All kinds of painkillers that were killing people. We now have a serious new problem, as you know, with that. All kinds of drugs that didn't work, even though they were advertised. And, you take a pill that doesn't work, you still have a side effect. In addition to losing money buying the pill. He went on the Phil Donahue show. One doctor, Ray Anderson, he was the CEO of Interface Corporation in Atlanta, Georgia, the biggest carpet tile manufacturer in the world, with plants here and abroad. And in 1984, he heard a lecture from a businessman on the ecology of industry. And he went back to Atlanta and he got his top people together. And he says, in 30-some years, year by year, we're going to move to a goal of zero pollution and 100% recycling. Unfortunately, cancer cut him down a few years ago, but he was about 2/3 of the way there, cutting the costs of the company and making more profit, and teaching some up-and-coming managers at Walmart how to cut their own expenses by dealing with recyclable minimal packaging of their products. He would give 200 speeches a year around the country, reflecting what his belief is. He called himself a recovering predator of the earth. One of the greatest CEOs of our generation. He's written 2 books, which you may want to read someday. Reverend William Barber, North Carolina, he has Moral Mondays. He is partially disabled. He's a fantastic orator. He's taking on one of the worst legislatures in American history. Reactionary, vicious, cruel, and he's making headway. And he started with nothing. He spoke at the Democratic National Convention the other month. We have Michael Marriott on nuclear power. He's holding the nuclear power industry's feet to the fire in terms of how unsafe it is, uneconomical, the potential for a catastrophic meltdown like the Fukushima disaster in Japan. We have a lot of people, and they're all described in this little book, but this little book is more. It shows how you can connect knowledge to action to get a better society, to get a better world. And in one area after another, as you know in your history, movements started by very few people. 6 women met in a farmhouse in upstate New York in the 1840s to start the women's suffrage movement, the women right to vote movement. It was not an easy movement. They would knock on doors in Kansas, for example, to get support, and people would open up the second store window and dump dirty hot water on them. They were arrested and beaten in Washington when they were picketing in front of the White House. For what? Just to get the right to vote. The big corporations didn't want women to vote. Why? Because women wanted to abolish child labor. 8, 9, 10-year-olds in factory dungeons when they should be going to school, depleting their health and dying early. And they didn't want, the big industries didn't want women to lead the consumer movement, as they were going after high prices, shoddy food products, and so forth. That they persisted. And they got the 19th Amendment through and got the right to vote. Led by women like Jeanette Rankin out of Montana. She was elected in 1916, first woman elected to Congress, voted against the atrocious World War I, which led to World War II, and was defeated the next year because you weren't supposed to challenge Woodrow Wilson and be unpatriotic for that deadly, avoidable war. She then gets elected from Montana to the House in 1940. She has a real sense of timing. Votes against World War II. Peace advocate. And then she loses her election. In between, she's a ferocious advocate for working people, for women, for consumers, and for electoral reform. She now is the representative of Montana in the U.S. House in terms of her bust. Her head is there along with 49 other states. They finally discovered what she did and paid tribute to it. And so again and again, when Rosa Parks refused to go to the end of the bus and started the latest civil rights movement, one person, she was actually preceded by a teenage girl a few months earlier who was also arrested, but she didn't get the press. Asbestos killed 400,000 people. It started with a lawsuit in Tyler, Texas, that exposed the asbestos manufacturers, knowingly exposing people to that deadly particulate that led to mesothelioma, lung cancer. Shipyard workers who come home with their dirty overhauls loaded with asbestos, contaminating their family. That started with one lawsuit in Tyler, Texas. So one change after another starts with one or two determined people. So you want to ask yourself, what role are you going to have in that entire process? Now, let me give you a little story. Oh, by the way, have any of you heard of these people that I mentioned? Okay. How many of you have heard of Lady Gaga? How about Justin Bieber? How about the latest rage, $6 million advance for her book to say dirty jokes around the country? Amy Schumer? All right. Now I could draw the contrast, right? I could give you 10 names that are changing the country for the better, fighting powerful, unjust forces, and you would not know their names because they're not on national TV, they're not on the kind of things you watch on social media, and that's part of growing up corporate. Now, let me give you an example. We all grow up corporate. Show me someone who hasn't grown up corporate, looking at society through these thousands of ads and food and autos and all the stuff that you're exposed to now. Show me someone who hasn't grown up corporate and I'll show you Visiting Martian, okay? We're all exposed to it. The only question is, when do we liberate ourselves and start thinking for ourselves, independently, critically, and not reverberating off the way we are expected to think and believe. Okay, now, let's say someone said, jot down everything you own. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. Jot down everything you own. So you start jotting down everything you own, you know. You own a cell phone, you own clothes, you own books, you own a motorcycle, maybe you own a car, you own a savings account. And they say, okay, keep going, keep going. When will you ever say, well, I'm a part owner of the public lands? 1/3 of America. The forests, the great forests in Alaska, in the West, the national parks, Yosemite, Yellowstone. When are you going to say, well, I'm a part owner of the public airways? The people own the public airways, and they give it free to the radio and TV stations 24 hours a day who decide who says what and who doesn't. But we own it. Why don't we have our own television studios? Why don't we have our own television time? We own the public lands, and the hard rock mineral companies get our gold, silver, and molybdenum free. We're the only country who gives it away. Well, not quite free. It's $5 an acre. So a Canadian gold company goes on public land in Nevada, next door, discovers $10 billion worth of gold. That's our gold. It's on public land. Goes to the Department of Interior with their geologist, says, here's the data. How much do we have to pay to own that gold? And by 1872 Mining Act, the government is forced to sell it for $5,000, $5,100 for $10 billion of gold. How come we don't say, hey, that's our gold? Why don't we have a share of that? That's growing up corporate. You know all these new industries, nanotech, biotech, aerospace, semiconductor, all the post-World War II industries, they got their launch with taxpayer-funded research and development. The Pentagon gave it to the aerospace industry. The Navy developed the containerization industry. NASA developed all kinds of industries. The National Public Institutes of Health produced all kinds of anti-cancer drugs. Those are your tax dollars, your parents' tax dollars. They give it away free. What do we get in return here? We get incredibly high-priced drugs. The highest drug prices in the world are by U.S. drug companies for the American people. They're not allowed to charge that high in other countries because they have controls. People have $100,000 for 1 year of pharmaceuticals or $50,000 when the taxpayer, you, your parents, help pay for that. So that's growing up corporate. Now, let me just give you another round of this. If I say the following words, crime, violence, regulation, welfare, what comes to mind? Well, street crime, violence, war, rape, burglaries, arson, regulation, government regulation, welfare, people getting their welfare checks, poor people, food stamps, and you're not wrong, you're not mistaken in thinking that, but there's far more corporate crime, corporate violence, corporate regulation, and corporate welfare than the other type which I just described. You remember, probably don't remember, but Wall Street was bailed out in trillions of dollars by the U.S. government. That's corporate welfare. Every day in Washington, they're shoveling out corporate subsidies, handouts, giveaways, like the public lands, the minerals. Regulation, I'll bet you've clicked on. Have you clicked on for these contracts in your social media? Clicked on? Have you ever read them? Can you even have access to them? Fine print? And when it's on paper, you know, when you're opening a bank deposit, buying a health insurance policy, getting a credit card or a debit card, sign on the dotted line. Do you know what they're binding you to do? They're forcing you, when you have a complaint, you can't go to court. They can change the terms at will, because it said, well, in the fine print, you let the airlines decide how many frequent flyer miles they can force you to pile up for a round-trip ticket. That's regulation far more than what government is doing. That's every day, trillions of dollars. And then violence and crime. Can anybody compare all the crimes reported in the Wall Street Journal? Corporations ripping, stealing people. And how about violence? Now, last year, 14,000 homicides. Bad enough. Almost 60,000 workers died from workplace-related diseases and trauma. OSHA figures. 65,000 died from air pollution from corporations. EPA figures. 250,000 people died from mishaps in hospitals, hospital-induced infection, hospital malpractice, errors, bad prescription combinations of drugs. Now, when you hear facts like these, you know what you have to say to the speaker? You have to say, where's your source? What's your source for all these figures? They're outrageous. Why aren't we reading about it? Why aren't politicians talking about it? These are hundreds of thousands of American lives dying in ways that could be prevented. Okay? The 250,000 fatality figure was from Johns Hopkins University Medical School last March. And they said that was a very conservative figure. It's probably much worse. The 65,000 figure was EPA. So always ask people, when they give you facts, what's your evidence? When you hear government officials say they're going to send soldiers here, drones there, and attack, you say, what's your constitutional authority here? What's your statutory authority? Are you violating the Geneva Conventions? You've got to do that. You see Trump, for example, he says all these wild things. He's got a terrific imagination, doesn't he? And just a few days ago, he said that Obama is importing hundreds of thousands of refugees and illegal immigrants to vote in the November election. And the press goes crazy and says, he's wrong, there's no evidence, he's wrong, there's no evidence. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't say to him, what's your evidence? And so he keeps saying it every week, every day. They didn't say to him, and he's very accessible to reporters, unlike Hillary Clinton, who hardly ever has a news conference. They don't say, Mr. Trump, you make all these statements. What's your evidence? What's your evidence? What's your evidence? Instead, they write articles and editorials saying he's wrong. It's different. Got to say, what's your evidence? What's your legal authority? Now, let me point out a couple of things here that you might be particularly interested in. You have a chemistry lab, right? Okay. Now, I don't know whether you're doing this, so correct me. What if you tested the local drinking water every semester as part of your chemistry lab? It's not easy. You develop protocols for heavy metals, lead, cadmium, arsenic, and then you put the report out on social media and you give it to a reporter for the local paper. Now, first of all, you will learn chemistry in a unique way. You will learn about the Safe Drinking Water Act. You will learn about what's going on in places like Flint, Michigan. They discovered belatedly some very serious levels of lead in parts per million, affecting kids' brains and health generally. And when you leave the school, go on, you'll be a budding citizen activist. You will be a monitor wherever you live because you'll know how to do it. You'll know how to monitor the local public drinking water department. You'll know how to ask for reports you're entitled to ask for under the Drinking Water Act of 1974. Anybody stopping you from doing this? Let's say you have a government class that's taught in your senior year. What if you had a course, part of the government class is Congress 101. You just titled it that way. It's sort of like getting ready for college. And you studied your 2 senators and representatives and what they did in the months that you have the class. And you announce it. You write to 2 senators and representatives, say, we are studying you. We're studying your votes, your campaign contributions, your behavior in committees, what bills you put in, what you oppose, how much time you spend going to nearby office buildings in Congress to raise money every day. I hear it's 20 hours a week. And you let them know that you know. Suddenly you become important to them. Suddenly you become important to them beyond your wildest dreams. Because when you put out that report, you put it out on social media and everybody in the state can have access to it. Can anybody stop you from doing that? So this connecting your classroom with community issues is a very important way of getting you to remember what you learned. There are studies showing that when people are out of university or college, 5, 10 years, they've forgotten 97% of what they factually learned. But when you learn by doing, when you learn by acting, you remember, and then you build on it in future years. But you're doing something much more important. You're developing a higher estimate of your own significance in life. You may have very good training, you may be very bright, and you may have jobs that are trivial, but they pay well, like producing these silly apps. Billions of silly apps are coming up like wasps. Oh, excuse me, I don't want to degrade wasps. Billions of foolish things are coming out of this stuff. And you've got more important things to do than to trivialize your life that way, even though it may pay very well. Now I want to end with an interesting story about Einstein and William Blake and Isaac Newton. Now, have you all heard of William Blake? Okay. Have you heard of Einstein? And Newton, right? Okay. So one day Isaac Newton is in a social gathering in London. And a woman comes up to him and says, Mr. Newton, why are you so much more brilliant than other scientists? And he looked at her and he said, I'm not so much more brilliant than other scientists. I just can hold the problem in my mind and concentrate on it longer than most of my fellow scientists. Remember the word, concentration. Now we move to William Blake. Social occasion in England. People come up to him and they praise him. You know, he's a very creative poet and artist. And one acquaintance came up to him and said, Mr. Blake, with whom are you living now? And Blake looked at the person and said, with whom am I living? I'm living with my imagination. Pull out the word imagination. And then Einstein was reported to say, rather modestly, quote, I have no special gifts. I have just a passionate curiosity. Pull out the word curiosity. So you have imagination, concentration, curiosity. Those are the great carriers of your mind, but they don't go far enough. You have to have a sense of injustice. You have to have a sense of justice. You cannot have a sense of injustice. You cannot have a sense of justice without a sense of injustice. Think about that later, when you think something's unfair in the world. There are two sides of the same coin. Now there's a lot coming in at you. There's a lot of clutter from the social media. There's a lot of text messages about nothing pouring in and out. There's a lot of living in virtual reality. A lot of not looking up at nature enough, going out in nature enough. I was walking down Connecticut Avenue a few weeks ago in Washington, D.C., and a young fellow was walking down parallel to me. It was a big sidewalk, and he was looking at his cell phone. So I started a conversation. I said, do you ever think that this cell phone controls you rather than you controlling this cell phone? And he goes like this, yeah, I think so sometime. Never looks up. So we cross a cross street where he could have gotten killed. He relied on me to tell him it's okay. He keeps looking up. We're walking down another 2 blocks, having a conversation. He was multitasking. He's listening to me, but he's looking. And I finally veered away, and I said, well, it's nice talking to you. Bye. And he said, yeah, bye. Like a narcotic. You got to be very wary of that, because it flatters you. It gives you personal satisfaction. It's called narcissism. Ask yourself what it's doing to you. He never looked up to see the trees. He never looked up to see the horizon. He never smelled the flowers. Virtual reality. And in a few years, you're going to have Oculus Rift. You're going to have multidimensional virtual reality. Removing you more and more from social conversation, personal interaction, even with your own family. I'm told there's some people now, the kids, they get up in the morning and they text message their parents and tell them what they don't want to eat in the kitchen downstairs. And it's only going to get worse. So think of what it's doing to you and what price you are paying when you distance yourself from the natural world to that extent. So I'll leave you with one question. How many of you have already decided in this world of ours that you're quite aware of now, from climate change to wars, to livelihoods, to tolerance, to kindness, to love, how many of you are determined after you finish your formal education to be a leader in the advancement of justice in this world or in your community as you see it and be civically engaged to make a difference? Can I see the hands? Have any of you decided not to? You've got it pending, okay? Don't ever let go of that question. That question will determine how you look back on your lives. Whether you look back as some very rich lawyers that we wrote a book about who made a ton of money representing corporations, representing polluters, representing influence peddlers, representing looters of pension plans, and they missed the justice bandwagon. And they don't have a very good feeling about it in their 70s and 80s. So always ask yourself that question. And that will lead you to fulfill some of your greatest life possibilities. If you want to get my column free and have 7 minutes of agitation every week, just go to nader.org. nader.org. Some people say, well, your age, you don't understand. Don't ever have anybody tell you that. We helped reform the nursing home movement in America in the 1970s with 17 and 18-year-olds in a high school in Connecticut. And they came down in the summer with their teacher, and they investigated nursing home reports in the government departments. They put out a book called The Last Segregation, 1 Million Americans on Mistreatment of Elderly People in Nursing Homes. They testified before the U.S. Senate. They testified before the U.S. House. They got national media, and they started a major ripple throughout the country in state inspections and other improvements in the nursing home treatment of defenseless elderly people. And I was told when we brought them down from Washington, are you crazy? You're giving this kind of serious task to 17, 18-year-olds? And I said, well, can they think? Can they read? Do they have energy? Do they have concern? Do they want to make a difference? Yes. Doesn't matter how old they are. Don't ever let anybody tell you that. Thank you very much.
Now we'd like to open it up to questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and Emily will be our mic runner, and will bring a microphone to you. So, Indigo.
Hi. I was wondering, what's your opinion on the laws in over 20 states that allow businesses to refuse service, work, and medical care to the LGBT community?
Somehow I couldn't hear it.
Oh, sorry.
Can I say it again?
Sure. I was wondering, what's your opinion on the laws in over 20 states that allow businesses to refuse service to LGBT community members?
Oh, I think they're going to all be declared unconstitutional. If they're all dropped in like 10 pins, as they say. There's an example for you. You see a few people decided enough is enough, and within 10 years there was a transformation in the legal treatment and public opinion of of LGBT people. It's a fantastic example. And there's a lot of brutality that was involved, and a lot of bigotry, and they persisted. Again, see, it all started with a few people, and the history's been written on that.
Let's see, I can't see who that is.
If I'm reading the tenor of the country, everybody is pretty disgusted with both political parties. It seems that the only way to get a third party would be through something like ranked choice voting. Is there anything going forward to try to start a third party that will be an alternative to the two corporate parties we have now?
Well, you do have the Green Party. I think it has the best platform by far of any of the parties in America. I ran on it. You have the Libertarian Party, sort of mixed. They're good on civil liberties, good on opposing empire and war, and but they don't like health and safety regulation. They want to abolish the IRS or abolish the Regulatory Food Drug Administration, EPA. You can always write in your choice if you want to have a voice of conscience. But you're right, there isn't a really strong third party because the system is a winner-take-all system. At the presidential level, you can win the popular vote and lose the election, as Gore did in 2000, because the Electoral College, which is on the way to abolition because of a man in San Francisco, who is getting states to agree to each other, with each other, like California, New York, and others have passed laws and say, we will throw our Electoral College votes to any presidential candidate who wins the national popular vote. So that's halfway there now. So we do have to make some changes. Ranked voting, I think, doesn't San Francisco have instant runoff voting? Some cities have it. That, you go and vote your first, second, third choice, and until someone wins the majority, you go down your ranking. So if you vote for Jane Doe and she loses, and there are only two left, then your second choice triggers until someone wins the majority vote. So that gets rid of the so-called bigoted word, spoiled. Imagine that the two parties have spoiled our political system. It's for sale, it's for rent. It's a war, they're both war parties, they're both Wall Street parties. They have the nerve to call the Green Party, which is an honest party representing changes in our country that are supported by a majority of the people, that the two parties have taken off the table, like a living wage and crack down on corporate crime. They call the Green Party a spoiler party. I think it's going to happen when someone rich starts, does what Ross Perot started to do. And I think it's coming fast. I think the two-party duopoly is nearing the end of its unchallenged regime. They created the Presidential Debate Commission, and none of the media, when you saw, how many saw the debates? You notice how the Debate Commission was described as a non-profit, non-partisan institution? Are you kidding? It was created by the Republican Democratic Party in 1987 to get rid of the League of Women Voters, which sponsored debates up to then. And then it proceeded to get funded by Anheuser-Busch, AT&T, Ford Motor Company. It's controlled by the two parties, and guess what? They don't want anyone else on the stage. So it's basically a private corporation that decides who the American people are going to see and evaluate. And if you don't get on the presidential debate as a third-party candidate, you're done. That's the only way you can reach tens of millions of people, unless you're a multi-billionaire and can advertise. So you see how you're watching these debates, 80, 90 million people, but they're not seeing how they are being manipulated and restricted in terms of their choices. So I think it is coming. We've broken some of the ballot access obstacles with litigation. They're not as bad as they were 10 years ago, but they're worse still than any Western country. Just think, you're living in the USA that obstructs voters from voting and obstructs third-party candidates from giving you more choice on the ballot than any other Western country in the world, bar none. Not even close. And we're the land of the free, home of the brave.
Will?
How do you think like, when women weren't allowed to vote, how do you think it,
You
like,
need to get very close, please, to the mic.
sorry about that.
That's better, good.
How do you, when women weren't allowed to vote in the U.S., even though that was on the Constitution, how do you think that affected how different presidents became winning and stuff when they weren't allowed to vote, and how it changed now that women are allowed to vote?
I've never seen a study on that. That is, women were allowed to vote from 1787 on. How would that have changed who would become president? Is that what you're asking? Yeah. I've never seen a study of that. I think there would have been a greater sensitivity by the politicians to child labor. You can't imagine how cruel child labor was. Imagine 8, 9, 10-year-olds going down the mines, the coal mines, and iron mines, and factories. I think that you might not have had a different president, but you would have had a different sensitivity by the presidents who were elected. They're incredibly, men are incredibly oblivious to the concerns of women. Even today, we're the only Western country that doesn't have universal paid maternity leave for everybody, universal child care for everybody. All of what countries in Western Europe, they have that. And so we're still very backward when it comes to women's rights. Women pay more for certain things. There was a study in the Harvard Law Review. Women pay more for new cars because the salespeople say, hey, as a woman, we can rip her off. They pay more for dry cleaning. The difference between a woman's shirt and a man's shirt. Now they pay less. It's gotten better because it's one of our projects. They used to not have equal credit opportunity. Like a husband and wife walk into a bank to get a mortgage for a house. And one of the questions that the bank asked the woman was whether she was pregnant. Because if she was going to have a child, that was going to affect their household expenses, and maybe they wouldn't be able to pay the mortgage. Well, you can't do that now. That's illegal. Equal Credit Opportunity Act. So that's gotten better.
I was wondering what draws you to the Green Party as opposed to like the Democratic or Republican Party specifically?
You mean the difference?
No, like what do you like about being do you like about the Green Party? Like why did you choose that as your political party?
Yes. Well, number one, they want to reform the corrupt campaign finance system. And they walk the talk. They don't take money from super PACs, even if they were offered. They don't have these fat cat fundraisers in Beverly Hills. They rely on small contributions. Number two, they think the enforcement budgets for corporate crime are ridiculously small. There are not enough federal and state cops on the corporate crime beat. And that affects the money, the way what you get for your money in the marketplace, what you get for your investments, whether you're going to be cheated on your pensions, whether you're going to have to pay more taxes because the rich and powerful pay less. So they want a strong corporate law and order government. Third, they want a living wage. They were way ahead of the two parties in terms of restoring an inflation-adjusted minimum wage. You know, and the federal minimum wage, $7.25. As Bernie Sanders says, that's a starvation wage. If it was adjusted to inflation from 1968 to today, it'd be $11. There are a million workers in Walmart who are still making less today than they made in real purchasing power in 1968. The head of Walmart is making $12 million an hour. There's a million workers making less than $10 an hour. Let that sink in. $12 $12,000, did I say million? No, sorry, $12,000 an hour. $12,000 an hour. You know, by noon on January 2, he's made more than any one of those 1 million workers make in a year. I'm not counting benefits. Very, very lavish benefits.
For those of us who don't want to have a career in politics, but do want to break into the political system, what advice do you have for us?
Have a career in civic action outside of politics. You know, these politicians get a lot better when we're a lot better as citizens, watchdogging them, holding their feet to the fire, not letting them manipulate us with flattery, flummoxing, and fooling us. Have you ever met a politician who doesn't flatter the people? I mean, you may be looking at one, but I haven't. They always flatter you, don't they? They remember your high school graduations, and they cut ribbons, and they smile. And they go back to Washington and do the dirty work for corporations and other special interests. So if we watchdog them, if high schools and colleges studied the two senators and representatives semester after semester as part of their government course, or a special course in college, you can't believe how they'd shape up. Otherwise, they'd ship out. Because you're informing the entire voting constituency. That's the one benefit, great benefit of the internet. You can do it now without having to pay for stamps or long-distance calls.
I recently read a poll that even though the U.S. claims to be the most democratic and free country in the world, countries like Iceland, Sweden, Norway, and Hong Kong have been voted the most democratic, gender equal countries in the world, and some people believe that the U.S. is moving backwards in terms of women's rights and equality. Do you believe this? What's your opinion?
Well, I can see you get that impression with Trump, who's, you know that Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times wrote a column Sunday. You should look it up, Kristof, and he had like 15 examples. And here's how he started. Imagine if Hillary Clinton bragged about cheating on her husband and called men piece of ass. Okay? And then he went through. Imagine if Hillary Clinton did this. In other words, imagine if Hillary Clinton did what Trump did and what he said and what he bragged about and how he bragged about companies of his going bankrupt and he making money, stranding the workers and the creditors and the suppliers, and how he bragged about not paying any taxes. And you should always make a copy of that, because more than anything else, that shows the residual double standard in politics. It's Nicholas Kristof. He's a syndicated columnist for the New York Times, Kristof, a huge defender of women and girls, human trafficking around the world. He actually goes in the most horrific areas of the world and writes articles for the New York Times. But in other areas, it certainly is better than 20, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, you're not there yet, but in all the indicators, professions, for example, when I went to Harvard Law School, there were 550 students, 15 women. And in 1950, before 1950, no women were allowed in Harvard Law School. Why would you have women in Harvard Law School? They're going to have babies, they're not going to practice law. Why take up a seat in the Harvard Law School? That's what the professors told us. And so and now it's like almost 50-50. So in a lot of indicators, it's getting better. But it's a never-ending struggle.
Where do you see our country in 4 years?
I don't have a telescope. I think what's happened is the politics has been degraded terribly. I think parents all over the country are wringing their hands. They have their 7-, 8-year-olds mimicking Trump and his language. And sort of there's a barrier that was broken on things you just don't say in politics. And it's going to reverberate at the state and local level. The worst prospect, and I hope it never occurs, is we're pushing a lot of people around the world to the limit. And we've been pushing people in the Middle East for over 100 years, carving up their countries, splitting up tribes, backing dictators, oil, all the rest. And you don't think they felt it when they tried to overthrow their dictators or try to get a modest parliamentary system? And our arms and our money and our diplomatic cover supported these dictators as long as they were anti-communist. Then 9/11 came, and we retaliated like crazy people. Instead of having a multilateral pursuit of the attackers or the backers of the attackers in northeast Afghanistan, we started blowing apart Afghanistan. And then we blew apart Iraq, a country never threatened us. And we're teaching them how to fight us. And now instead of just one gang in northeast Afghanistan, it's in 20 countries. All kinds of offshoots of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, Libya, Somalia, Yemen, Pakistan, parts of Africa, Mali, not to mention Syria, and other countries. And so we're teaching them how to get back at us. Remember, they weren't in our backyard for 100 years. We were in their backyard. That's very important to remember. We were the colonists, the imperialists, etc., with the British and the French after World War I. And you can see they're getting smarter with social media. They're getting smarter with the use of the minimal weapons they have. They're getting smarter coming here. And the problem here is we have a total nervous breakdown with one terrorist attack. I don't mean 9/11, just a smaller scale. Everything else is blacked out that we're all concerned about. The media goes into a frenzy, high ratings, and they repeat CNN, Fox, and so on. We're not ready to defend our democracy against our backlash against terrorist attacks. The difference between liberty and security has always been a tension one. But as Benjamin Franklin once said, those who prefer security over liberty deserve neither. And what can happen with just a few attacks, they don't have to be on the scale of 9/11, is that our civil liberties are suppressed, people are afraid to speak out, dissent is considered treason. Our public budgets go to a huge profit-making business called the war on terrorism, instead of rebuilding our schools and clinics and public transit, roads and buildings and bridges. And we become a completely captive country by our own rulers. That's the danger. Is our democracy rooted strongly enough to resist something like that? Or do we capitulate into an authoritarian regime run by oligarchies and plutocracies? And don't think it can't happen here. I think when you ask students your age, do you have freedom? Most of them will say yes. But remember, there are two kinds of freedom. One is personal freedom. You can choose your friends, choose your clothes, select the kind of music you want to eat, what you want to hear, rather, the food you want to eat. You know, personal freedom. You want to buy a bike, you want to go somewhere, you want to take a part-time job, you want to pick up a book that you want to read. That's personal freedom. That is not civic freedom. Civic freedom was defined by Marcus Cicero over 2,000 years ago. Brilliant definition. Freedom is participation in power. Civic freedom is having a role in your government. What your government's doing, what Wall Street can get away with or not get away with. It's having a role in forces outside of your personal life that are going to affect you. Tie you up for 30 years with student loans at outrageous interest, with fine print contract. So you want to make sure you don't mistake your personal freedom for the most important freedom of all, that can boomerang on your personal freedom. Look at what some people are going through around the world. And that's civic freedom. Very important distinction. In fact, one way you can practice it, you say to people, "Hi, how are you?" Even if you're sick, you say, "Okay." So I'm sure you can write a 1,000-word essay on your social life. And I'm sure you can write a 1,000-word essay on your academic life. You may be able to write a 1,000-word essay on your athletic life. Can you write a 1,000-word essay on your civic life? How many can write a 1,000-word essay on your civic life? But not as easily, perhaps, as the other three. Because perhaps you haven't had enough civic engagement, civic experience in the community. How many of you have never been to a Walmart? Are you from Mars? Okay. You don't have a Walmart where you come from?
There's no Walmart in this area.
Oh, no Walmart. Okay, I'll make it easy. How many have never been to a McDonald's? Oh, vegetarians. How many have never been to Starbucks? Why not?
I don't like coffee.
He doesn't like coffee. All right. Okay, well, you saw this is actually encouraging. Usually no hand goes up with Walmart or McDonald's. How many of you have never been in a courtroom as a spectator? How many have been in a courtroom as a spectator? Oh, because your class takes you there? Circuit court? Okay. This is a very unusual class here. How many of you have never been to a prison as a spectator? Okay. How many of you have never been to a city council meeting anywhere? See that? How many of you have never been in a shopping mall? So to go buy things, you go there. But the civic arena, you see, town meetings where important things are being discussed. And most people don't show up. You know what my favorite currency is? It's a $2 bill. You know why a $2? I always carry a $2 bill. You know why? You remember what's on the side of the $2 bill? First of all, they put poor Jefferson on a $2 bill. I mean, he's a pretty great president, gets a $2 bill. This is what's on the $2 bill. This is the picture of the men, they're all white males, July 4th, 1776, who signed the Declaration of Independence. And whatever you say about them, some of them were slave owners, etc. They thought they were signing their death sentence against King George and the most powerful army in the world. How'd they come to do this? They showed up by carriage, horse, walk, whatever. They showed up. We're not showing up enough in our country. We're not showing up to vote enough. We're not showing up to run for election enough. We're not showing up to town meetings, marches, rallies. If you don't show up, nothing happens. And so when people beg you to pursue your own sense of justice and show up, and you say, "I'm too busy," ask yourself, are you too busy to make a democracy work? Are you too busy to get rid of some pretty unfair situations in our country?
I was wondering what, in your opinion, was your most important achievement that you had?
My most important achievement, what?
That you had, that you founded, that you started.
Well, it's various. One is to keep telling people one person can make a difference. Because history shows that. And if people give up on themselves, as they often do, they just give up on themselves. I can't take on this. I can't fight City Hall. I can't do this. I can't do that. Then you don't get that critical burst of energy that changes so many things. So you can't give up on yourself. You know the 4 excuses people give for not being active citizens? One is they don't have time. The second is they don't know how to do it. Third is they can't stand being criticized and attacked in return and slandered. And the fourth is if they had time, they knew how to do it, they weren't blistered by moonbeams, it still wouldn't change it because the big boys are going to do whatever they want anyway. Those are the 4 excuses. Well, you know, it never takes more than 1% or less of the people to make change in this country. Every major change you read about in your books, other than wars, abolition of slavery, women's right to vote, the farmer labor movements in the late 19th century, to regulate the railroads and the banks and have the right to form unions, they were all started by less than 1%. And they were finished by less than 1%. 1% of the people in this country is 2.5 million people, adults. If they simply had a Congress watchdog club in every congressional district and opened up some offices of advocacy, watchdog the Congress, summon them to town meetings, tell them they want this change for the country, and connected with each other in the 435 congressional districts, Congress like this, you couldn't believe how fast they would change. Because nobody's watching them except the realtors are watching them from back home, but the homeowners aren't organized and the tenants aren't organized. The insurance agents are watching them from back home, but the health insurance policyholders, the people who buy property tax and life insurance, they're not organized. The auto dealers are organized back home, but the motorists aren't organized. Now, who outnumbers who? It isn't even close. The consumers outnumber them. But if they don't organize, they're going to end up paying, and paying, as they do now. Outrageous overcharges. I'll just illustrate. There's a fellow at Harvard. He's an expert. He's an applied mathematician. His name is Malcolm Sparrow. He's from England. And his specialty is how fraudulent billing is in the healthcare industry. So we spent this last year $3.3 trillion on healthcare, more than anybody in the world, by far. He says at least 10% of that is fraud. That's $330 billion. He said that's the minimum figure. It's called computerized billing, fraud, and abuse. Well, you know, if we're not organized, we're going to keep, who pays for that? We pay for that, directly or indirectly. You got bills for services that are never rendered, they manipulate Medicare codes, etc. And here's the rub. How many people in this country, as citizens, are working on $330 billion of healthcare fraud? Full-time, I don't think 5. How many people are working on $400 billion of uncollected taxes that the IRS can't collect because they don't have an adequate budget to do so? I don't think 5. How many people are working on auditing the Pentagon? There isn't anybody in the country, conservative or liberal, who doesn't want government agencies to be audited by the Congress. Well, the Pentagon is the only department that's not audited. They're violating federal law for the last 34 years, since 1992. And every Secretary of Defense keeps saying, yeah, we're going to audit the Pentagon. Well, when you don't audit $650 billion of your money, this is what happens. A few years ago, they discovered they can't account for $9 billion in Iraq in the first year of the criminal war. $9 billion? The Air Force is buying billions of dollars of spare parts because they haven't got audited warehouses, which turned out to have those spare parts. How many people in this country, as citizens, full-time, like you have environmental activists, full-time, are working to get the Pentagon audited? Not one. So then you ask yourself, well, of course we're going to get shafted. Of course we're going to get abused, right? But that's a source of optimism. Because if not one, what if 10? What if 20? What if 30? Then you get some real action. And that's not beyond our capacity. You see, when we're not on the field, on the playing field, why do we complain when we lose? I mean, if Notre Dame fielded 11 players up against Ohio State, but somehow the Ohio State football players had a big party the night before, and only one player shows up on the other side for the kickoff, and Notre Dame wins by 300-0. What's the conclusion? That Notre Dame is a superpower? That it cannot be challenged? As long as you put a few people on the field, things will change because most people support you. It comes in 99%. Who doesn't want the Pentagon to be audited? Only Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Raytheon because they get away with a lot of overcharges and shenanigans. But yeah, that's nothing compared to the number of people, small businesses, accountants, ordinary citizens. What? You don't audit the biggest budget in the federal government?
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, thank you for letting our students take priority for questions.
I have one question.
What's your opinion on the propagation of misleading statistics such as the 77 cents on a dollar women's wage statistic?
You mean that women are paid 77 cents on the dollar?
Yeah, that's a pretty common misleading statistic used by the Democratic Party.
Yeah, well, that depends on the assumptions. For example, if you mix certain occupations that are heavily women with occupations that are not heavily women, you come out with different figures. And so it's a disputed figure. Are women getting equal pay? Well, the way I like to do it is case study. For example, in corporate law firms, women who've been in the law firm at the same as men don't get as much. That's a study that was made. At University of California, Berkeley, my sister's been teaching for 56 years, and there's still, and she's tenured, there's still male professors being paid more than she. She's been depleted of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I know the arguments by, the National Review and others trying to say that's not the case. Do you want to comment?
It wasn't quite the question on that specific.
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't hear you right.
It's more on the idea of people, specifically politicians, using statistics to mislead people, like using them in the wrong way.
Oh, yeah, well, they do that all the time. And the thing is, when they don't use statistics, like when they don't talk about $400 billion of uncollected taxes, when the Republicans keep cutting the budget of the IRS to the bone. Because every dollar in the IRS brings in $10 in uncollected taxes. That's what I'm worried about, what they don't come, like the figures on climate change. Oh, that's just the natural geological cycle. Well, on the natural geological cycle, we'd be getting cooler. And they don't want to deny that it's heavily man-made. So there's a category where they don't want to talk about the facts or the best statistics available. They don't want to talk about 2,000 people a week dying from medical malpractice. That's one. And then the other is all what you're referring to, how the Democrats will say Reagan's economy grew very slowly. The Republicans say, no, we have figures showing it grew faster. And then there's a battle of statistics. And that is very bewildering to people because they say it with such conviction on the talk shows. And fortunately, with the internet, you can separate it out that if you want to take the time and see what figures they use, employment, unemployment, GDP, all the rest of it when they say, well, Republican presidents have better economies under them than Democrat. Let me just leave you with a perfect example of student organization. How many of you heard of the public interest research groups, the PIRGs? Okay, we helped start the PIRGs, and they assess themselves, the college students, through a referendum, a few bucks a year, and they put it in a nonprofit group, and they hire people largely in their 20s and early 30s, environmentalists, mass transit advocates, prison reform people, consumer protection, and they file lawsuits, they lobby, they do all the things to make it a better society. It's a great way for them to learn practical civics, and the students often sometimes get course credit for working on these projects, depending on the professor. All right, so you're at Middlebury College, Vermont, and your name is Bill McKibben. How many people have heard of Bill McKibben? Okay. So he's talking to his small class about climate change. This was maybe 20 years ago. And they talk, one semester after another, they're talking about climate change. So one day, some students raised their hand and said, Professor McKibben, when are we going to do some action here? All we do is talk and talk. And so they suggested a march to Burlington, Vermont, on a weekend. Banners, climate change. And they got 1,000 people to march to Burlington. The press writes it up and says, this is the largest march in the United States on climate change. And so they look at each other and say, the largest march? Little Vermont? Something must be wrong. And McKibben said, that's when I realized we're losing. So they start this 350.org. How many know people? They start 350.org. It is the major grassroots group in America today on climate change issues. They have spread all over the world, dozens of countries. They have 110 full-time staff. They rallied around the White House against the Keystone Pipeline. 1,500 people were arrested protesting that in front of the White House. That's a historic record. That takes an immense amount of organization. Get people to get arrested and spend maybe a night in jail. How did it start? 10 students, 1 teacher. It's the small community that starts it all. There's a book by that name written by the former head of the Tennessee Valley Authority in the 1930s. He went around the world asking the question, how do we get justice movements underway? What triggers them? What multiplies them? And he comes back with his answer from his observations, the small community. And he writes a book called The Small Community. Arthur Z. Morgan is his name. And I've written this book. And I've poured a lot of experience in this book. And it's designed to open a lot of windows for you, a lot of possibilities. There's no greater joy in life other than being parents than the joy of achieving justice, of saving lives, of ending hunger, of blocking brutality. No greater joy in life. And this is all 140 pages. And I hope that you'll get it and discuss it with your fellow students. And those of you who are not students, start discussing the action recommended in your living rooms. That's where things really start. Everything starts with civic conversations. And the tool of democracy, it's a nice phrase you should think about. The tools of democracy, like Freedom of Information Act, is a tool of democracy. Getting information from your government as a matter of right. Nursing home inspection reports, meat and poultry inspection reports, for example, is a citizen summons where instead of the members of Congress, 535, flattering us, manipulating us, we summon them to our town meetings. And just to help the reader, I've actually drafted a summons on page 140. A formal summons of your senator and representative. And turnout in this country is so low for returning senators and representatives that if you can assure them of a couple hundred people in the auditorium or wherever, in the classroom, they will likely come and visit you. That's how low the turnout is. We just had 2 senators in my home state of Connecticut come to the first law museum in the world. You can go to tortmuseum.org. It's the law of wrongful injury. If somebody sells you a dangerous medicine or a defective car, you can sue them if you're injured. And the senator, we have two pretty liberal senators, Blumenthal and Murphy. And one of them, I can't remember which one of the staff called up and said, well, we'd like to come, but can you assure us there'll at least be 30 people there? See how low the bar is? You bring up 200, 300, 400, they'll be stunned. You tell them that you're both conservatives and liberals, because conservative and liberals agree on a lot of things in this country that are never reported, because divide and rule is the strategy of the guys at the top. All kinds of things. Civil liberties. Against corporate welfare. Advocate peace. Defloat the military budget. Criminal justice reform. Left-right support, which is unstoppable when it coheres. It's an unstoppable political force to members of Congress. If you have that in the audience, then you really impress them. Even if they turn pale with fear. You got to make sure that members of Congress still fear the people. When they stop fearing the people, we're really in trouble. So 7 minutes of agitation, go to nader.org, you get the column free, and let's hear more from you in the coming years and decades as leaders in the world for justice.